Thor Odinson has had some spectacular battles over the years, but today I wanted to shift the focus a bit. We all know that Thor packs a serious punch, but what about Mighty Thor? What villains has Jane Foster defeated in her time wielding Mjolnir? Well, that's what I'm discussing today. Like, did you know she fought the Phoenix Force, and a villainous Odin, and a few different versions of Loki? Let's discuss them all right now. Loki is arguably Thor's biggest enemy and quite frankly his best antagonist. He's like the antithesis of the god of thunder. Thor is muscular, beefy, sometimes a little dense, and overall godly, while Loki is a slimy trickster who likes to use his words right up to the point where he stabs you in the back. Loki is someone any Thor would have to fight. It's like a rite of passage. I wanted to start with Loki on this list because the situation is kind of funny. So Jane had just become the Mighty Thor, and Loki was still trying to figure her out. Loki goes to her and says that a brand new Thor needs a brand new Loki. The old Loki was a trickster, he said, but this new and improved version of the god of mischief promised that he was trustworthy and someone Jane could count on. How does Jane respond? By using the hammer to smack Loki's head clean off. Yeah, rule number 1 of the Marvel Universe is don't trust Loki. And then, as a bit of added fun, Jane has to face a bunch of different versions of Loki, like a really deadly Lady Loki, but Jane also comes out on top here. Okay, I know Thor isn't a villain, but I wanted to get this entry in early just to set the stage a little bit. A lot of the fights from here come from the original Mighty Thor storyline, which I think is just the bee's knees. I love seeing Jane, who we don't exactly know is Jane at the time, figuring out how exactly this whole new situation was going to work. Well, if you're the Mighty Thor, then you're probably going to have to get through the OG Thor. After Jane first grabs the hammer and is transformed, Thor comes thundering in like he normally does and completely misreads the situation. He thinks Jane is some sorceress who enchanted the hammer, failing to even think that someone else might be worthy. The two fight, and while it's not a total beatdown, I do think Jane defeats the angry, sort of villainous Thor here. She proves to him that Mjolnir is now more powerful and more zippy than ever, and that she is, in fact, worthy. She's someone that Thor is comfortable ceding the spotlight to, which is an important step on Jane's journey. Speaking of early Mighty Thor encounters, I wanted to mention her technical first fight. Look, let's be real, frost giants are terrifying. They're giants and they're frosty, which is like the two worst combinations you can be. Anyway, the Marvel Universe had a serious issue where most of the Avengers had been frozen by the frost giants, and the only one who could save them was the Mighty Thor. Problem was, Jane had had the hammer at that point for about 3 seconds, so she was still a little rough around the edges. But it shows what a great partnership Mjolnir and Jane formed, with the two sort of giving power to each other and letting each other do their own thing when it came to smashing frost giants. I know that sounds weird because I'm talking about a person and a hammer, but we all know Mjolnir is so much more than a big smashing weapon, right? Alright, this one is seriously impressive. The Phoenix Force is one of the most powerful entities in the universe, and in an epic battle with Mighty Thor came out on top. Now there's something you don't see every day. It's an awesome moment. It's during a time where Jane defiantly states that she is Thor, and she's not gonna die in bed from the cancer that's affecting her mortal, fleshy body. The Phoenix Force is coming at her with the fires of the universe, and Jane basically shrugs it off and suggests the Phoenix Force try chemotherapy sometime if it really wanted to feel pain. Man, how awesome would it be to see Jane fight the Phoenix Force in Thor: Love and Thunder? A guy can dream, right? Odin is a little different in the Marvel comics. In the MCU, he's a somewhat kindly old ruler who has a dark past as a tyrant, but he's a little worse in the Marvel comics. He's undeniably stubborn and one of those who were angry about the whole, hey, who's this chick holding the hammer now? Yeah, one of those dudes. Odin was furious and tried a few different times to capture the Mighty Thor. It all led to a fight between the two of them where Mighty Thor not only asserted her dominance, but did things like drop a moon on the old Asgardian. That's metal. Odin isn't exactly a villain in the comics, but his attitude and general old-timey thoughts in terms of who was worthy enough to wield the hammer did deserve a big moon smashing. The more I learn about Mangog, the more I'm convinced I want to see this character in a future Thor movie. Yeah, on the surface he's just a big dog monster, but in reality he's actually the sum total hatred of a billion beings all smushed into one super angry creature. I sort of feel like instead of Fenris in Thor Ragnarok, we should have had Mangog, as that would have been a better creature thematically for Hulk to fight, but I digress. Anyways, in the storyline, The Death of the Mighty Thor, Jane had to make the ultimate sacrifice. Basically, it got to the point where if Jane grabbed Mjolnir and turned into Mighty Thor one more time, she wouldn't survive. But Asgardia was about to hurtle into the sun thanks to Mangog's actions, so Jane jumped into action and saved the day. This led to a fight with Mangog that she initially didn't exactly win, but then eventually tied up the monster with the chains that bound Fenris and tossed the monster into the sun. See, there was a logical reason I mentioned Fenris earlier. Look at me, bringing it full circle. So the second Silver Samurai had an advanced suit of armor and energy swords, which made him think he had an edge over just a plain old hammer. Well, obviously that was a big mistake on his part. When he faced the Mighty Thor, the villain mocked Jane for her outdated weapon. Yeah, well, Jane's response certainly shut Silver Samurai up. She proceeded to use the hammer to zip it around and just relentlessly bash the baddie until he was knocked out. Yeah, maybe don't make fun of anyone who carries around a big hammer and obviously knows how to use it. Just some friendly advice. Carl Crusher Creel, aka the Absorbing Man, was basically the embodiment of all of Mighty Thor's haters. When the villain first encounters Jane, he says basically all the things you'd expect to hear from a certain darker part of the internet. Things like, why do there have to be so many women heroes now, and why does she need to be called Thor when there's already a Thor, and Thor's the manliest hero around, things like that. And the resolution is quite satisfying. Mighty Thor throws Mjolnir so it zips all around Absorbing Man, but while he's focused on that, Mighty Thor just clocks him and breaks his jaw. So great. And then after that, Absorbing Man's romantic partner, Titania, shows up and is so impressed that there's a female Thor that she lets herself get beaten and captured. Sure, she also does this because she wants to rekindle the romantic spark with Absorbing Man, but still, that's a 2-for-1 bad guy defeat right there. So as questionable as Odin can be, he has a much worse older brother in Cul Borson. This slimy, sleazy Asgardian is a powerful sorcerer, and Odin tasked him with tracking down Mighty Thor and bringing her to him. Well, what Cul Borson did is perform a ritual to take control of the super powerful Destroyer armor in order to hunt Jane. And any battle with the Destroyer armor is sure to be epic. We all know what kind of serious damage that magical suit can do. Coupled with the control of the sinister Cul Borson, and you've got yourself a deadly enemy you don't want to underestimate. Granted, this one was more of a team effort. See, Cul didn't know at the time who was actually under the Mighty Thor helmet, and a lot of the women he investigated showed up to assist Thor in fighting the Destroyer. Obviously, the Destroyer wasn't destroyed because it's practically invincible. I mean, it does the destroying, it doesn't get destroyed, you get it. But they did manage to make it retreat, and that counts as a win. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents can be really hit or miss. They can't all be Coulson is all I'm saying. Anyways, I'll keep this one brief. During the mystery of who is Mighty Thor, there were these two agents constantly on Jane's tail. They thought they had her too. They were convinced on her identity when all of a sudden a sickly Jane Foster appeared out of a portal to help an injured Mighty Thor. But wait, how did this happen? Well, the Jane that appeared was actually a manifestation of Mjolnir personified, which had shown up to help its new owner out. That's sweet, right? And given how relentless these two agents were, this trick definitely counts as a victory in my book. Dario Agger is the CEO of a multinational energy company, Roxxon Energy. And even if that fact alone doesn't make him a huge supervillain, then how about the fact that he sold his soul to become a Minotaur with a desire to conquer different realms because he made a deal with Malekith the Dark Elf that his company could have the mineral rights to any one of those realms that was conquered. He also had Roxxon Island, which was a big floating island in the sky. After being captured, Dario activated the Agger Imperative, which put Roxxon Island on a collision course with New York unless he was freed. Instead of caving to his demands, Mighty Thor and Mjolnir successfully were strong enough to stop the island from crashing into the city. As you've seen on this list, some entries have been huge, splashy fights, while others are just tiny victories. This is one of those tiny victories. So King Laufey is a bad dude, not someone you want to be around. Don't ask him to take you to the airport or help you move out of your apartment because he just won't do it, okay? Stop asking. But in the comics, in the War of the Realms storyline, which centered mainly around Malekith, King Laufey did play an important part. And then in the end, King Laufey loses an eye after Jane uses one of her last remaining hammer throws in order to send him a proper message. See, not a flashy total domination, but one that made Laufey super mad, which deserves a shout out. Sometimes defeating villains leads to awesome perks. So we all know there have been a lot of new Avengers groups over the years with different members. Well, one of the newer groups that was forming included Miss Marvel, Miles Morales, Vision, and Sam Wilson's Captain America, in a comic titled All New, All Different Avengers, so you knew what you were in for. Well, while this group was fighting an alien known as Warbringer, and fun fact, he's actually a Chitauri, yeah, definitely a far cry from the paper people in the Avengers movies. Anyways, while this group is fighting Warbringer, coincidentally, Mighty Thor is also there to fight Warbringer. Hey, it's a small world. Heroes will cross paths all the time, okay? Anyways, this isn't necessarily a defeat, but Mighty Thor does throw the final blow before Warbringer flees, so that's gotta count for something. So I'll dive into the specifics of Secret Empire in a second, but one result of that was Mighty Thor being sent to a different dimension to take her out of commission. Don't you hate it when that happens? Anyway, while there, Jane was without Mjolnir and was given a makeshift hammer by a friendly farmer named Hekla. Well, we all know what happens to friendly farmers in these types of stories, right? On a quest to return home, Jane had to face a big monster named S.H.I.E.L.D, who ended up tragically and fatally hurting the farmer. That's hecla sad, isn't it? Anyways, Thor defeated S.H.I.E.L.D with her new temporary hammer and eventually returned home. It's a small story, but one that shows that Jane doesn't just need Mjolnir in order to be mighty. Okay, this last one isn't technically a Mighty Thor victory, but it's a Mjolnir victory, and I think that deserves some praise. So in the Secret Empire storyline, we saw the Cosmic Cube rewrite reality and make Steve Rogers an evil Hydra version of himself. Bummer, right? Well, there was a huge final battle that saw the original good Steve Rogers reappear and get in an epic brawl with his evil counterpart. The fight ends when good Steve lifts Mjolnir, which previously, due to the reality shifting interference, had evil Steve using it, and good Steve promptly hits evil Steve so hard that his mind probably time traveled back to the 40s. So the weapon that Mighty Thor always uses had a hand in defeating this very dangerous threat. So these are all villains Mighty Thor has faced, but what are some villains you want to see live action Mighty Thor face in the future? Adam Warlock, an evil celestial, King the Conqueror, there's a lot of options. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching CBR.